Okay, I'm preparing. So at the end of the session, we also talk about the assignments, all the assignments. Okay, so now we are live in YouTube. So for today's session, we're going to look into develop a web application. So I just want to start this session by having a quick recap of what we did in the previous tutorial. So in the previous tutorial, for those who did not join, so I do know Yusuf, you had work, so you couldn't stay for long. And what happened in the previous tutorial, in the previous session with Andrea, we just went through the basic steps that have to be done when it comes to planning, developing our mobile application. So what we did, we just went through a system development life cycle where we explained the planning phase and how planning has to be done in order to be effective. So what we looked into the major consideration from the client, and also the aspect and the feature that has to be covered from our developers in order for us to deliver a really responsive and efficient mobile application. So we also looked into the tools which are used depending on if you're building an Android application or you're building an iOS application. And some of the tools we spoke about how the layout of the design has to be built with, for instance, Figma, which is a useful software for web designing. Then we also looked into a couple of wireframes. We also had some images, some example of how this wireframe has to be done. And also we looked into a video which explained the steps that has to be carried out. So what we're going to do today, so when it comes to developing, if you're working in a development team, no matter what role you are, or if you're like a DevOps, if you're working as a developing operation team, depending on what position you cover, there are several steps that have to be followed, where you have, for instance, looking into a system development lifecycle, you have to look into the planning phase, designing, analysis, implementation, and then maintenance. And if you're working, if we're now looking into we're going to look into the developing phase in this tutorial. So what we're going to look into is how we're going to be able to develop an application. We're going to look at SDK, which includes Android SDK and Android Studio, also iOS system development kit. So by the end of the tutorial, the learner should be able to install the chosen system development kit and set up the project for an application. So we're going to look into the tools and technique, which will include live development, a simulator or test of a device, or debugging, use of libraries and sample code, documentation activities and methods, and also the learner will be able to design a basic mobile application using system development kit environment. So I just want to give looked into a video which will take us through the steps that have to be done when developing a mobile app. So in the previous tutorial, we spoke about the environments where we can create where we can develop code. And there are, for instance, if we're developing an Android, you then have to download Android Studio, which is a system development kit. While if you're working with iOS, you have to use Xcode, which is the environment used to build iOS applications. And also, I mentioned in the previous tutorial that the programming language used for Android devices is Java or Kotlin, while for iOS devices, we have Swift programming language. And also there is the option of online open source, when the previous tutorial shared some of them, which I currently don't have right here, but this April.io is pretty much an online source where you just simply need to create your account. Once you create your account, you can log in and you can now start using the API in order for you to build your application. So now we're going to look at this tutorial of this guy, which is simply build a mobile app, which is connected to a structured query language database. Can you guys hear the video?
Yes.
Cannot really hear the video.
Can you not hear the video?
No.
The video is not speaking.
Or what? I can share sound. Yeah, I've done it. Sorry.
Hey guys, Max Katz here with ATHE. In this video, I want to show you how to build a mobile app connected to a relational database in about 5 minutes. So to start, we need to expose the relational database via a REST API. And I have a database here. Now my database is running on Amazon, but of course you can connect to your database. And we can look quickly at the database. So this is an example where employees enter expense reports. And that information is saved into a relational database, and you would like to build an app, a mobile app, where you can review those reports. So just pretty simple, just one table with some names. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to connect to the database from APRI.io. And we're going to use API Express feature. So we're going to create a new connection. I'll call my database, select a database type. Now the host, and we don't need, and then the port 5432. 5432. Now database name is DemoDB, and then the username and the password. Right? Now we can save, and we can instantly test. Right? So test successful. So we connected to the database. It's running on Amazon. Let's go back, and now we're going to create a project. Now the project will expose the database via REST APIs. So first we create a connection, and then a project, and we'll call this expense report API. Let's open it, and here we can create services, and we're going to do it automatically via a new model. And we'll just call this expenses. And select the connection. Now we select the table, there's only one, and we're going to generate all these services. Right, so all these services were automatically generated, and we can test the service. Right, so for example, find, now we can get all of them. So we're going to remove this, scroll down to test, and you can see we instantly get the data, right? So we're invoking a REST service that connects to the relational database. So this is good. We're going to copy this URL. right? And we're going to go to the app. So the database connection is done. We got a REST service and it's working. Let's go to the apps tab and we'll create a new app. Expenses app and click create. All right, and we already have a page in the app. We'll just call this app and we'll drag and drop a list. Now, because we're going to be getting the data, we just need one item. And then we're going to go and create a service and paste the URL. Now, the only thing is for the where, we need to put, because we're getting all the values, an empty J is going to be empty. Right, and now we can go to test, click test and test the service. Right, so it works. We're going to create the response and we're done with the service. Let's go to the UI. We're going to go to data, service. All right, nothing for the input, so just for the mapping for the output. And then this is the collection of all the expense reports and this is the name. Save. The last thing is to invoke the service. So we select the page and we're going to use page show, invoke service. All right, and we're ready to test. All right, and here we go. We get the list. So you can see how simple it is. Again, we connected to a relational database. We created APIs and then build a mobile app with those APIs. So again, definitely give this a try. Sign up for an pre-DiC starter plan and try API Express. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so
do you have existing?
so let's just look into. Okay, this is not. It's not a free tool. So this one you have to pay to use the features. But I know there are loads of them that are free. They're free open sources, which are pretty much easier to use because they are online open sources rather than using Android Studio, which is pretty much more complex and it requires a lot of time to set up the environment. And once you set up the environment, you then have to build your API, your application portable interface, which is basically your program that will now connect between your client and your backend where you have your database. So now we're just going to look into some of the functions. So we're going to understand the purpose of using a software development kit, which basically is going to allow us to add functionality to the application, and will also enable them to build an standard component of the apps easier and faster. So for us having this our SDK, an SDK is basically going to be having the same function of an IDE. So as we already seen from mobile computer programming, where we use Eclipse or Apache NetBeans, or even when we were in web development, we use Visual Studio Code. And these are all like environment where we can download on our desktop, and we can now run and execute code. So this is one of the benefits of using them. So here is just a checklist of how we can now download an SDK on our machine. So for instance, we have to, step 0, we have to pre-install checklist. So what we need to do is to install this huge package. So for Android Studio is around one gigabyte, and Android SDK about 5 gigabytes. So if we look into the difference, say there's Android Studio Ide, which is the integrated development environment, which is based on IntelliJ. And so IntelliJ is an IDE used for building Java programs. And also here there's Android SDK, which is for developing and testing Android apps. So they might look slightly different, but at the end of the day, they are the same purpose. And here I'll share the link for everyone to download Android Studio, sorry. Once you've downloaded that, you now have it on your file explorer. You just need to open it and just follow the instruction in order for you to set it up on your machine. Then now, when it comes to create a new program, you then have to launch Android Studio. Then you have to choose create a new project. And then you have to select the templates. So depending on how we're going to do this configuration, there are loads of steps that have to be done before having this graphical user interface. While with the online option is pretty much easier and it does everything for you. Also, we have to set up an emulator, which will allow us to now test this, will now allow us to view and have this virtual, this Android virtual machine on our application, on our desktop. So the following steps are now to run the Android app on the emulator. So these are the various stages that has to be done in order for us to run it. So here is just an example of how the code in Java will look like, where we pretty much know it's going to be working with classes and object, because it's based on object-oriented programming, which we already looked into when we were doing our computer programming. So they basically have the same logic where we create this object, and this object must have methods in order for them to work and be executable. Also, this on the right-hand side, we have an image of implementation where we have a simple schema where we have, for example, we have restaurant, and then we put name, address. So we have a kind of database with, in our schema, we have different data that has to be stored in a relational database management. As you can see, the backend app are hosted on a remote server. So coming back to there, as you can see, it is they're stored in a remote server, and this front end and back end, they communicate each other through Restful architecture. So by Restful, when it comes to Restful architecture, is simply the way we transform files. So he pretty much work with HTTPS, which is hyper transfer protocol process, which allows us to share our data from our backend to our front end, and then launch on the internet. So Restful restful architecture is very important to understand. So it's not an API, it's not coding, it's simply an architecture. So it's just simply the way data is being shared. So let's just pull out an image. So this image explains RESTful API, which is simply an architecture. So we have a database. Our database now connects to a server, and this server, which all our data is stored, can now communicate with our front end, our user interface through our RESTful API. So this API is simply an architecture which allows us to work with HTTPS, and it's really important to understand how representation, oh yeah, this is the name, representational state transform architecture work. So this is everything for today's session. And one second. Is there any question for me?
No.
Hello, Mr.
Hello.
Rita.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the member application,
Yes.
where you just explain now.
Yeah.
Is there any means like you are teaching now, like everybody with the hand will be on the desk, that we will like do the practice together, so we know what we are doing. So when you are teaching this way now, like you're just giving like theory to people, but without the practical, there is no way you can advance.
Yeah, that's the point, because I tried to download Android Studio on my machine, but I had some problem. So I was looking into having some online open source where I can do this. But as you can see, I opened one of them and you have to pay for it. So I have to find a free version.
Okay.
So if I'm able to find an online free version, we can have a session, a tutorial session. And also if I'm able, I'll also try to reinstall Android Studio on this user, because I do have Android Studio, but it's on the other user, but I did not made the option of downloading on this one. Let me check if it's
So like
oh yeah, no, is here.
Understood. So
Yeah.
like what will help the students if like the way you are teaching now, if there is practical and you see to our development, what we have gone to, you will know what we are doing. But if you teach and we don't have like the Android Studio, like to come on the free one to go on practical classes, I think we will just
I
listening.
do understand you want more something hybrid where we have practical and tutorials together, right?
Yeah, that would for me, that would be better.
That would help. Yeah. I do understand. So as you can see, because I've not used Android Studio on this account, I was using it on the other one. So welcome to the wizard. Can you still see my screen? Hello?
Yeah.
My screen, yeah. Yeah, so I just did the steps. Yeah, because I have it on the other user, so I've not used it here yet. That's why. So what we'll do for the next tutorial, prepare a simple mobile app to build. So we'll go through that one together. So the only assignment I'll give you guys today for today's session is try to download Android Studio on your machine and go through the configuration, the settings, and see if you are able to do the configuration. So once you've done the configuration, in the next tutorial, which will be next Tuesday, we'll have a practical session where we'll just create a simple app with Android Studio. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Okay, so now it's installing on my machine.
Right.
Okay, so this is
like what you like today's teaching, is it on like video on the system or?
no, today is just theoretical.
All right, okay.
Theoretical, yeah. So we'll do a practical on Tuesday.
It's okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, guys, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. And see you next week.